Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special live edition of Cavs Insider. Getting ready for playoff basketball, the first time since 2010 for the Cavaliers. The team they lost to, of course, the Boston Celtics.
Yes.
Back in 2010. The Cavaliers return to the playoffs against the Boston Celtics. This time the Cavs are number 2 seed, the Celtics are number 7. I'm Dan Labbe. He's Chris Fedor. We're going to get right to it. And we're going to bring in from MassLive.com Jay King. He is their Celtics beat writer joining us via phone. Jay, how are you today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Jay, a couple of very hot basketball teams, actually. We know how the Cavaliers kind of finished the season. At one point, they were 19-20. The Celtics, though, 24-12 since February 3rd. What's changed for them, and are they as good as that record?
Well, a lot of things have changed for them. First, they put Jay Crowder off the bench. They started playing small. They started playing with a lot of shooters on the second unit. And then at the trade deadline, they already started to win. They won 4-5 before the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, they picked up Isaiah Thomas, and he's really been a difference maker for them. He's just given the second unit a huge scoring jolt that they badly needed, and some pick and roll offense, and he's changed a lot. And they just really buy it. They really believe in themselves right now. They're really executing well down the stretch of games. They're still in a lot of games in the fourth quarter. So this is a young team that plays hard, and they've really been playing well for the last couple of months.
Jay, you mentioned Isaiah Thomas. He got my vote for Sixth Man of the Year, but this is a guy who's kind of bounced around the NBA. Sacramento didn't want him anymore. Phoenix decided they didn't want him, traded him at the deadline when they traded a bunch of their players. So why has Isaiah fit so well in Boston with your team?
Well, they just don't have anybody else that does the things that he does. You know, I think in Phoenix it was tough because he was with Dragic and Eric Bledsoe, and those guys needed the ball too. In Boston, there's nobody else who really needs the ball. You know, they're all complementary pieces, and so he's just come in and kind of taking control of the offense, which is what he's always wanted to do, and which is what the Celtics need him to do. So it's really been a good fit for both sides. And, you know, those other places maybe didn't want to give him that freedom or didn't have the roster to give him that freedom. In Boston, he's got all the freedom he's wanted, and it's just kind of become his team almost, even though he comes off the bench.
All right, Jay, so I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast a lot, and to hear him talk about Brad Stevens, this guy is the second coming of Red Auerbach. How good, though, is Brad Stevens, and what kind of job has he done with this team?
It's pretty incredible. You know, their second unit, which has been pretty much their driving force, made up of a lot of guys that were just kind of cast-offs. You know, Jonas Jerebko, the Pistons didn't want him. Jay Crowder, Mavericks didn't mind losing him. You know, Isaiah Thomas was coming off the bench, and, you know, Phoenix obviously didn't want to keep him. They gave him up for basically a first-round pick. So, you know, just a lot of guys that other teams didn't want, and they're playing really, really well. And Stevens, I mean, you look down the roster, almost everybody on the team is playing at, like, career best levels. Mm-hmm. It's like from Evan Turner in the starting lineup, Avery Bradley, Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Jonas Jerebko. It's like they have a ton of guys playing better than they ever have. And I think Stevens, Tyler Zeller too, I think Stevens deserves a lot of credit for that. He's diagrammed a lot of plays in the fourth quarter. He's just really good. He's just a really sharp guy. And in a lot of ways, his team resembles him in that they never think the moment's too big. They execute well. They're always staying poised. They're always playing hard. They're really taking on his mentality.
Okay, Jay, you talk about how good Brad Stevens has been and how good the Celtics have been. Winners of 9 of their last 10, 24 of their last 36. But now here come the Cavs. The Cavs are predicted to be the favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference by a lot of people around the country. Being around Boston, being around the team, how's the team feeling? How are people feeling about this first-round matchup?
I said this the other day. The interesting thing about the Celtics is that they understand that they don't have a lot of talent, and yet they still believe in themselves. Huh. So they're going into this first-round matchup. You know, they know Cleveland has a lot more talent. They know Cleveland has the 3 best players in the series, and the players think they have a chance. You know, they think if they execute well, if they do what they need to do, they'll give themselves a chance. Do I think they have a chance? No. They're just not talented enough, and the Cavs are really a tough matchup because the Cavs can spread you out just like Boston does, but they also have the size with it with Kevin Love, Timothy Mozgov, and just the size that Celtics don't have. Obviously, LeBron can really decimate your defense. The Celtics don't have enough rim protection, I don't think, to stop him, especially in a 7-game series. So I don't think they have a chance, but the team, thinks that if they do execute, they'll give themselves a shot.
Jay, there are some people that are predicting a sweep, actually. Give me a reason why it won't be a sweep.
I think it would go 4 or 5 games. I think if it's not a sweep, it'll be because Stevens steals a game or Isaiah Thomas steals a game, or if Cleveland just, comes out after winning the first 2 and comes back to Boston and just doesn't really try its hardest. I think Cleveland's a much better team, and it's just a really tough matchup for Boston.
What's the status of Avery Bradley, Jay?
He'll be fine. He had a left quad contusion in their second to last game, and it sounds like he could have played in the final game if it was worth anything, but they'd already clinched the 7th seed, so it didn't really matter. They left him home, and he's expected to be fine.
All right, Jay King, Celtics beat reporter for MassLive.com. That's our sister site over in Massachusetts. Jay, appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, and you look at the Celtics team, as he was talking about them, they sound like the kind of team that if this were a 1-game series, maybe you'd be a little nervous about facing them, but obviously this is the NBA. This isn't college. This isn't high school. You can be a chippy team that believes in yourself, but over 7 games, that's just not enough.
He mentioned that he thinks that the Cavs have the 3 best players of the series.
Yeah.
The Cavs might have the 6 best players of the series. Honestly.
Yeah.
And that's how Boston has been able to get by, though, because of the coaching, because of the system. They move the ball extremely well, and they've come together as a team. When they traded away Rajon Rondo and Jeff Green, they had to come together as a team because they no longer had a focal point on offense. The Cavs have 4 guys that could be a focal point of offense. So it's just an interesting contrast in styles, I think, in this series. And Boston plays the kind of way that if they get some talent on that roster in the future, they can be a threat. But it seems a little bit too early for him.
Yeah, and look, Brad Stevens has done an excellent job with this team. This is a guy that came from the college ranks. You never know how that's going to work out. But Brad Stevens certainly seems like a guy that Boston can kind of, you don't build around a coach, but he's the kind of guy you want on the bench as you build your basketball
He's
team.
the best thing that Boston has going for it right now. You can talk about Isaiah Thomas all you want to, Marcus Smart, Kelly Olynyk, Jared Sullinger. The best thing that Boston has going for it is Coach Brad Stevens because, Dan, as you mentioned, in the playoffs, sometimes it does come down to coaching and making those adjustments and the execution.
All right, let's bring in another part of our Cavaliers team. He covers LeBron-James and, of course, the Cavaliers. Joe Vard joining us via phone. Joe, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing well, Joe. You did a pretty extensive piece today on the leadership of LeBron-James when he came back. You look at that letter, you look at all the things he said. That was kind of his project, to be the leader, to be the guy that would carry this team to heights that the Cavaliers have never been to. Do you believe that he's delivered on that so far?
I think he's been a lot better over the last couple months. I just remember just being a little, trying to think of the right word. I don't know if surprised is right. I don't know if missed is right. But something was off those first 2 months. And some people were kind of chalking it up to his play, complaints about a lack of athleticism. But if you look at his numbers, they weren't all that different than they are now. They were a little different, but he ended up finishing with a pretty good year by NBA standards. Say that tongue in cheek, but the numbers were a little off for him. But something else was off, and it just, I don't know if maybe disappointing was the word, and just how he seemed to handle his own discomfort with what was going on around him those first couple months. Now, nobody's perfect, certainly, and it takes a while to figure out, certainly. And he, in those 2 weeks away, made a bunch of decisions, and the 3 of us have talked about them all year, what he decided at that time. And one of them was just to be a little bit more open and understanding with some of his guys, and it paid off huge. He's been a totally different guy since January, a totally different leader, and one that you can certainly follow. I just think up through basically that Miami game on Christmas Day and into the chill mode thing the next night, he was kind of a hard guy to follow. I mean, just because he's telling you to play defense, he's telling you to share the ball,
Yep.
he's telling you to try, and then we all were watching him to see what he did, and it was wanting in some areas.
Joe, you mentioned LeBron being a different guy from January until now. How do you expect him to change now that the playoffs have arrived?
Well, I hope that I hope that what we just see is him being a little more aggressive, a little more forceful with his own play. I hope that he continues to involve the rest of the guys, which I believe he will, especially Kyrie. And I hope that he continues to foster an environment in which these young players can succeed, given that this is the first time they've been in this situation. I hope, in other words, that he doesn't get to the playoffs and change his own persona so much that it makes the young guys who are nervous already uncomfortable again. I hope he carries that same sort of understanding that he had in January and February into this postseason, and maybe kind of gets them going a little bit by getting himself going. I mean, as we all know, there's a number of different ways that LeBron approaches each game. He kind of takes the lay of the land, and he decides this is a night where I need to go off in the first quarter. There's this a night where I need to kind of feed Kevin and let Kyrie get some space before I assert myself. And I'm just wondering if, especially maybe game one, game two, if LeBron says, okay, I'm going to set the tone, I'm going to take the pressure off and kind of allow my two wingmen, who are, really good, important players as we go down the stretch here, to kind of get their feet wet. They may have a better idea. I'm just saying I wonder if that's the way to approach this.
Joe, we've seen it before with LeBron. There's going to come a moment where he has the ball in his hands, and we know he's not afraid to give the basketball up to anyone on the floor at any time for a big shot. Are these guys ready?
Yeah, I think so. I really feel like Kyrie is. And he, of course, has, he can prove me wrong on Sunday, but I really think that he has got his mind right, and has had it that way for several months. I don't see him as someone being bothered by pressure. I think that most of his problems over the first part of his career were either injury-related or attitude-related, but it's like a totally different thing because he was just on a totally different team. He's got the right attitude now. He's got a little bit of a hip thing, but I mean, his game is there, and I think that he wants, I think he wants the opportunity to deliver that shot. The X factor, of course, is Kevin, and I think he's the one who's going to be really nervous going into all this, and really put a lot of pressure on himself going into all this, and he's the one that's going to have to find his comfort level early and settle in time to make that big shot whenever it is that they need one.
Which would be better for the Cavs in the first round against Boston, Joe? Sweep them, get them out of the way quickly, or deal with some adversity in the first round so that you have an idea of what's going to come in round two and then the Eastern Conference Finals?
No, I think they need to sweep because of this. I think that and I think David Black needs this, I think they need to build up a certain cachet to where when trouble arises in the second round against Chicago, the answer isn't automatically, well, Black's a rookie coach, and so he can't be trusted, and everything's gonna implode. They need to have had a really good first 4 to 6 games, I think, before they can avoid that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if they lose a game to Boston that they shouldn't, or they lose that opener in the second round, you're going to hear all of those doubts and criticisms, and maybe they'll be deserved, or maybe they won't. We'll see how David, adjusting games and uses timeouts and all that. But just from a drama, mental, psyche, for the good of the cause perspective, sweep is the best thing.
All right, Joe Varden, he will be covering, of course, the Cavaliers and LeBron-James during their playoff run, along with Chris Fedor and Chris Haynes. So check out all their coverage at cleveland.com/Cavs. Game 1 Sunday at 3 o'clock. Joe, thanks for the time.
Hey, can't wait for this weekend. Thanks.
All right, Fedor, before we go, we got a little bit of time here.
Uh-oh.
I got the bracket here.
Okay.
Okay, we can't break down every little matchup for every series, but let's start with the East.
Come on, Dan. I've got things to say.
I know you do. Atlanta, Brooklyn.
I think it's going to be Atlanta in 5.
All right.
Look, the thing that you have to know about Brooklyn, I'm not going to go into too much detail. They didn't want to win this year. They tried to trade their best player at the trade deadline. Remember that?
I do.
Brook Lopez, it looked like he was on his way to Oklahoma City. They hang on to him, and he turns into one of the best players in the month of March. And they almost lose to Orlando in the last game of the season. They stink. They still stink.
Don't change Eastern Conference. Whatever you do, don't change. Toronto, Washington. Paul Pierce has had some things to say.
Yeah, I mean, I was all about Washington at the beginning of the season, saying, all right, they got Paul Pierce. You put him there. He's the veteran with the young guys, John Wall and Bradley Beal. He's going to be the glue that brings them all together. Washington is still a top 10 defensive team, so I think that's going to create problems for Toronto. But I like Toronto. They've got home court advantage. Washington didn't play well down the stretch. I'll take the Raptors in 7. I think that's one of the few that goes to 7.
So then let's Atlanta-Toronto. That's your conference semi matchup.
I'll go with Atlanta there. I think too many people are overlooking Atlanta. They're top 10 in offense, and they're top 10 in defense, and they have a system where you just plug guys in, and they play extremely well. So I think they're a team that if somebody gets in foul trouble, that's okay. If somebody gets a minor injury, that's okay, because they've put this system in place that is designed to make guys flourish. They had 4 All-Stars on that roster.
Chicago, Milwaukee.
Chicago in 4. Milwaukee stinks. Milwaukee traded Brandon Knight at the trade deadline, and I understand the reason behind it, but they replaced him with Michael Carter-Williams, who, yeah, he can make some plays every now and then. He can score 30 every now and then, but he's just not consistent enough. And I think in the postseason, when the defense really picks up and Chicago's defense is going to swarm Michael Carter-Williams, he's one of the most turnover-prone guys in the NBA in the regular season. He's going to get like 7 or 8 in a game here and there against that Chicago defense. I think the best play for the Bulls is still to come.
Cavs, Celtics, obviously.
I've got Cavs in 5 here. I think the only thing that prevents it from being a sweep is Jay was talking about from Boston. It's Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is the kind of coach that can get one game for a team. He's the kind of guy that can come up with something down the stretch that is going to allow Boston in one game to overcome the fact that they're just completely overmatched from a talent standpoint.
So now Chicago-Cleveland, I was talking to somebody about this, just kind of walking through the office, and this series would remind me a little bit. You remember that Cavs-Celtics series that won 7 games? Boston was the better team, but the Cavs were a little more battle-tested, and they were able to kind of grind and drag that series out to a Game 7 when Paul Pierce and LeBron-James had that battle. It feels like there would be similarities in a Chicago-Cavs matchup.
Yesterday here on cleveland.com, we said that Golden State did not want to see San Antonio or Los Angeles. And now they're only going to have to see one of those teams. For the Cavs, I thought going into the postseason, they didn't want to see Chicago and Atlanta. Now there's a chance that they're going to have to see both because of what happened in the final game of the regular season. Chicago's the kind of matchup that can give the Cavs a lot of problems. They're top 10 on defense. And with Derrick Rose coming back, if he can be anything close to Derrick Rose, if he can just give them a little bit of a boost offensively, that could be the missing piece on offense. They've been incredibly inconsistent offensively, but that could be the missing piece. So I think that's a nightmare matchup for the Cavs because Chicago, like you said, battle-tested. Tom Thibodeau has been coach of the year before. He's a defensive-minded guy who can design defenses to not take away Kyrie or LeBron. You can't do that. But to limit those kinds of guys, I think that goes 7. And the only reason I'll pick the Cavs is because they'll have home court advantage.
So Atlanta-Cleveland. That's the matchup everybody's been wanting.
This to me is a toss-up, honestly. I mean, I would have to see how the Cavs are playing going into that series and how Atlanta is playing going into that series. Atlanta, I think, is a team that can give the Cavs a lot of problems. And we've seen that in the regular season. They move the ball effectively. They play terrific defense. They force you to be stagnant on offense, and that's a problem with the Cavs to begin with. I think it's a toss-up, and I'm not ready to make a pick on that one. I think it goes 7, and Atlanta having home court advantage could be very, very big in that kind of situation.
Let's stick a blank right there.
Yep.
Real quick, in the West, Golden State has a pretty nice path to the conference final. San Antonio has to play the Clippers and then probably Houston. That's a tough march to the conference finals, but who do you like out West?
I think Golden State and San Antonio are going to play each other in the finals. And because Golden State has home court advantage and they've only lost 2 games at Oracle Arena, I'll take the Warriors. I think it's their year. Look, they won 67 games, Dan, and they're beating teams by an average of 10 points per game. And this is more than just a jump shooting team. This is more than just an offensive juggernaut. They're number 1 in field goal percentage defense allowed. I mean, that's terrific for a team that's supposed to be soft and supposed to only play offense.
Yeah, that's a lot of wins, a big point differential.
Right.
I think people are going to see, as the playoffs unfold, just why Golden State did what they did this year. They're going to see a really, really good basketball team. Should be fun. So no prediction in the East.
I'm not ready, man.
Not
I gotta
going on
wait.
record.
I've got to wait until I see how the 2 teams are playing going into that.
You got Golden State coming out of the West.
I do have Golden State coming out of the West, barely, in 7 because of home court advantage.
Cavs Celtics starts at 3 o'clock on Sunday. It should be a lot of fun. It's the first playoff game of the day on Sunday. Everybody in Cleveland going to be tuned in somewhere watching that one. First time since 2010 that the Cavaliers have been in the playoffs. Thanks to Jay King from Mass Live, our sister site. You can catch all his content at masslive.com/Celtics. Or thanks to Joe Vard. I'm Dan Labbe. He's Chris Fedor. Thanks for watching.